Let me show you how to draw this cool forest path step by step the easy way. So right around, so let's see, right around, we'll just split it right in the center. Let's draw our horizon line right in the center. Maybe it's a little bit above center, but that's our horizon line. Now very lightly, we're going to draw some, not mountains, more like foothills, just like that. So now what I'm going to do, you can see the lines that we made here. They're very sharp. I want to use the side of my pencil. And when I do this, you can see that I'm holding my pencil differently. And I'm just going to lightly shade those mountains in their entirety. And this little exercise, what we're doing here, we're going to learn these tools, learn how to blend, and learn how to layer. And when we combine all of these little simple, very simple steps, I mean, this isn't difficult, right? When we combine all of these, it's going to turn into a really cool looking drawing that has depth and a lot of value and shading, and it's going to be cool. You're going to love it. I've done these with my nieces that are very young, 6 and 8 years old, and they get a kick out of it because their drawings look pretty nice. So I'm gonna break this rule because I don't know if I have a clean one. Okay. So you can use a tissue. I'm going to use my finger because I don't want to get up and leave you guys, but I'm going to use my finger just to blend this out. And I know I said don't do this, but I'm breaking my own rule. We're going to cover this, so it's not going to matter. We're going to layer over it, but I don't like doing it because it gets my finger dirty, and then I end up smudging. Like you could see, that's why I don't like using my finger. Anyways, okay, so we've got our first layer. And if you wanted to make it sharp, you could go and make sure if you smudged outside the lines. It's not a big deal. It's going to be very light. So that's our 2H pencil. You can see it's very, very light. Now we're going to draw a little road. Actually, we're going to draw it. It's going to come down like this. Come down at an angle a little bit. And then curve around. So you kind of make this kind of like a big triangle. And right here, we're not going to go all the way up here. We're going to go right here, just above that edge. And then draw the other side. And you can see now it makes that, with this little curve, it makes it look like the road takes a left-hand turn over here. The cool part is it makes, when you do that, kind of creates this little hill. So let's shade the rest of this in. And then right here, we'll just draw it, kind of go up to that horizon line. Shade that or blend that a little bit. Very rough. This part is just, we're just blocking in the basic shapes of our landscape. Now using that same pencil, this is our number 2 pencil. We're going to go just a little bit lighter, or sorry, a little bit darker, and start blocking in the basic shape of some trees. We're just going to draw these lines that go all the way up. Actually, let's not go all the way up. Maybe about there. And kind of put them at different angles. We're not worried about all of the details. We're just blocking things in. Very simple shapes. You can see this just looks like a big Y. We want it light because we're using that number 2 or that 2H pencil. Draw another one over here. It should be just a little bit darker than those mountains. We'll jump over here. It shouldn't be perfectly straight. You put a couple little, maybe one or two little branches. And we're kind of winging this. We're kind of we're kind of doing like Bob Ross. We're just we're going to piece it together as we go. I don't know what this thing is going to look like. I know the basic idea of what I'm going for, but who knows how it's going to come out. Hopefully it'll be nice and we'll all be impressed with ourselves. So now what I'm going to do, using basically the same value here, or the same tone, same darkness, I'm going to use the side of my pencil and just very, very rough. You don't have to worry about details. Just try to keep it smooth. And we're going to add some of these basic little shapes on top of those trunks of those trees that we made. Remember, you don't need, I promise, you don't need a lot of detail into this. We're gonna grab those little blending stumps that we started with that I showed you in the beginning, and we're gonna blend this all together, and it's all gonna blend almost to the same. You're barely gonna be able to see the difference from one from the mountains to the trees. But you can see it's very light. Everything's very light. And this is why you want to start with a 2H, because even if you try to go too dark, or even if you push too hard, that pencil, you can only go so dark with a 2H pencil. So you're not really gonna mess your drawing up too bad. But again, try to keep it light. And using the side of your pencil so it's not those real sharp lines. So this is basically our first layer. We're going to put many layers of this, and we're going to layer all of these different pencils. Not all of them, but a few of them. So now what I'm going to do, I've got that basic layer. We've got the mountains in the background. And if you don't have these blending stumps, I would grab a Q-tip or a tissue. I'm just cleaning it off that blending stump so I have a cleaner surface. Sometimes it's good. I'm going to use all that graphite that's on the tip of that, where I just kind of load it up like a paintbrush. But in this case, we want it somewhat clean. So I'm just going to small little circles. What I'm doing here is the paper has a tooth or a texture to it, and if you look really close, you could see how it looks kind of grainy or whatever. All I'm doing here is pushing the graphite into the paper and into the tooth of the paper, so it's not so grainy. So all those little valleys in the paper, and the tooth of the paper, is being filled with graphite. They also call this burnishing. Not quite. I mean, burnishing, when you get done, it's going to be like your paper is going to be super smooth at the end because it's completely covered with graphite. You can see I'm just blending it all. Even the mountains, I'm going to blend small, quick little circles. Same concept if you have a Q-tip, but if you're going to use some tissue, you could just do it. Just kind of use a corner. And it doesn't have to be sharp. It could just be kind of, you want it kind of blurry. So we've got that basic, we have that really distant layer. So that's with our 2H pencil. I'll give you guys a second. And it's gonna come together. I promise. Now I'm gonna jump. That was my lightest pencil that I have in this set. Now I'm gonna jump to a B, or maybe I'll jump to an HB. This is kind of like our number 2 pencil. And this is where we start to layer in some more detail. And these are very simple shapes. We're just going to add another little tree trunk here. Very simple. There's nothing to it. Doesn't have to be straight. I'm not going to do a ton of them. We don't want to get too carried away, and I'm going to go all the way up to the top over here. And maybe we'll do one more here. We're going to have many layers of trees, so don't worry if you think you don't have enough. We'll have plenty more as we keep moving along. And then let's see. Now we're going to do the same thing over here. See how we've got this kind of hill shape? Put a couple little, our little trunk. You want it just a little bit darker than what you already had. And then we'll blend those together. And maybe we'll use the side of our pencil again. Kind of doing the same thing. There's not a lot of detail to it or anything like that. We're just giving our impression, or drawing the impression of those little leaves and branches. But you can see this layer is going to be a little bit darker than the layer behind it. And every time we grab a new pencil and go a little bit darker, it creates more depth to our drawing. And I'm kind of tricking you because you can draw some of this. You could draw, you can create this without switching pencils, but by switching the pencils, it kind of forces you, as long as you use the same pressure from the same one pencil to the next, it kind of forces you to have different value or different tones in your drawing that'll make it look, make it stand out. And I think that's why, make sure you hit that follow button when we get done here. Go to IAmShaneBurke.com, or sorry, IAmShaneBurke on any social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you use, YouTube. Actually, YouTube is just Shane Burke, but and make sure you give me a follow, because I do these little 30-second, 60-second tutorials, and I try to trick people that don't know how easy drawing can be. You just have to learn, like, all of these little tricks I've learned over the years, and it seems very, very elementary or very simple, and it is. They are very, very simple. Like I said, if I could teach my little 6 and 8-year-old nieces to do this, I could definitely teach you. You have to trust the process, because it turns out really cool in the end. So I'm going to blend these with a blending stump. So right now, I'm using an HB. This first layer was a 2H. Right now I'm doing it in HB, or basically your number 2 pencil. And now I'm just using small little circles to blend that together. This is why I like doing, I always start with beginner stuff. And I think this is a good exercise to learn the materials and some basic concepts of shading and blending and everything. If you want, you could go, maybe you just darken up a couple of these little tree trunks back here. But there's going to be so many layers that it's not going to make much of a big deal. You got to trust the process. Small little circles. That's what I like to do to blend this. You want it kind of blurry, like the in photography and video, they call it the depth of field. It's got a shallow depth of field. So there's only a lot of it is going to be out of focus. It's way off in the distance, so it's kind of blurry. And the main subject maybe will be the road once we get closer. Okay, so that's our first 2 layers. We started with the 2H, then we've got that HB. Now let's go to, we're going to go a little bit darker. I'm going to use, I think this is a 4B. This might be a little bit dark. Let me go to a 3B. And we'll start adding a couple more trees. You can see already it's a little bit thicker, or a little bit, it's the graphite core is a little bit thicker, and it's going to be a little bit darker. And you can see as you're doing this, because the darker the pencil, the softer the pencil or the graphite, you can see the different texture in the paper. See how it's real grainy? And that's why I use these guys, because you could just smash all of that graphite into the grain so it doesn't look so so grainy. Okay. I'm going to do a couple of those. We're not going to get carried away. Maybe this one's got another little branch there. Now we'll jump over here, add one. And as you start adding these layers, you can see it's creating more depth. And those ones way off in the background, the lighter they are, the further they look, or they look like they're further and further away. And when you're drawing trees, you don't need to worry about making them perfect. They are, they're not man-made, so they're not going to have these perfect lines and perfect edges. So I'm just going to go now with my blending stump. Going to smooth that out. And then we'll add, let's see, should we add one more? Now let's finish with what we started. So now I'm just going to add the same thing using the side of my pencil. Just kind of going back and forth. All of these little spots don't necessarily have to touch. You put little gaps like this, and that's just a grouping of leaves. And we're not worried about drawing all of those little each little branch or anything like that. Something like that. And then you could go with your blending stump and start blending it all together. There we go. Let's see. So this last pencil I've been using, that is a 3B. I'm going to go over here. When you do these little circles, try to make them like ovals like this. Not long ways. You want them kind of horizontal. At least that's how I do it. If you did them the long ways, it would look like more like a swampy tree where the leaves and branches are hanging down towards the water or whatever. So if you do it this way, it just makes it look more almost like pines or oaks or something. And you can see I go back and forth layering these in. Maybe I could draw some that come way out here, right in front of this really bright spot. Okay, something like that. You can see it really light, and then kind of medium, getting a little bit darker. Let's add another one over here, another little layer, using those little quick little circles. And I really want it to overlap in front of this lighter tree. The contrast is going to make that tree on the lighter tree look like it's off in the distance more. And then I'll blend that. is just smooth it together. And then we're going to jump to the next layer. So that was our 3B pencil. Now I'm going to jump straight to a 7B pencil. I know you may not have all these pencils, but what that means is we're just going to go to now a darker layer. Make sure it's real nice and sharp. So from here, there's not going to be many. We're going to start here at the bottom. And you want this tree to be the darkest because it's closest to the camera. And again, you don't have to worry about it being perfect or anything like that. We'll do another one over here. Real dark. You want this one to be really dark. It doesn't have to go straight up. We want this to be as simple as possible. So even an 8-year-old could do it. Maybe we'll give it one more little branch like that. And then now we're going to just layer in some more of those little leaves. These ones are going to be a little bit smaller as they come closer because we can see a little bit more detail in there. And they are more in focus. So they're going to be a little bit sharper. But we're just doing our impression of all of these leaves. So you don't have to worry about trying to draw. I mean, this drawing is pretty small. There's not going to be a ton of detail. You're not going to see every little leaf and every little crease. So we're just drawing our impression of these leaves. And then you can go and blend some of those. That'll soften it and kind of tone it down a little bit too. So, and you can go add as many of these as you want or as few of these as you want, but I would just definitely recommend having some contrast from the foreground and these trees in the front compared to back here, back off in the distance. Now let's add some more over here. And I'm going to purposely skip a few little spots to make sure that those little bright areas in the background are seen. So there's some contrast. But I definitely want it to overlap so it kind of layers in front of those lighter trees. The cool thing when you use those little blending stumps, all these little scribble lines that we're doing end up getting kind of blended out and kind of all work together and blend together to make it look a little bit more realistic. And then once we get down to the bottom part with the road and stuff, it's really going to make a big difference. And that's where I think everything comes together and it looks pretty cool.
Hey, I hope you're having a lot of fun and really enjoying the tutorial, but I wanted to remind you, if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell so you'll receive an alert every time I post a new video. And if you want to take your drawings to the next level, make sure to check out my Drawing Master course at www.IAmShaneBurke.com.
Okay, so we've got our basic little forest here. Now we need to add a little bit of shading to the road. So the trick to drawing realistic drawings is no part of your drawing should ever be white unless it's the brightest highlight that you've a really bright highlight. So even every part of this is going to be shaded just a little bit. So I'm going to grab my 2H pencil. Sorry, I should have said that when I first got started. This is our 2H pencil. So we're kind of going back to the original pencil that we started with because this is called our midtones. Kind of our midtones. So if you think of 3 values of shading, your highlights, which would be the white of your paper, your midtones, which is medium, and your dark shadows, that'd be these darkest trunks of the trees. That's a good place to start when shading. It doesn't matter if you're doing a forest or a portrait, whatever you're doing. Think of those 3 values: your highlights, your midtones, and your dark shadows. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use, instead of my finger and not my blending stump, because if I use my blending stump, you're going to still see some of those lines. So I want it to be really soft. So I'm going to do it with my tissue. And it's just pushing some of that graphite into the paper. Try to be careful when you go over by the tree stumps because it's going to end up smudging it a little bit. But we just want a basic gray, kind of gray wash, because when we go and we erase and put our highlights in, you'll see it. You can't have highlights if you don't have a gray wash down. So you can't draw white on white paper if you don't have gray on your paper. So from here, hopefully you can still see your road a little bit. We're going to go over that a little bit more. Maybe we'll go with an HB pencil. That's your number 2. We'll kind of touch that up a little bit so you can see it a little more. Now, depending if we wanted this a paved road or maybe like an old school just dirt road through a forest, you could put some growth here in the middle of the road where maybe the tires or the cart and buggy didn't go over. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to make it like a paved road. So this is here's another quick little tip. These are called contour lines. They're not really contouring. They are. You see those chicks contouring their faces. We're going to contour our drawing. So I'm just going to draw really lightly these lines that kind of curve up a little bit and then die down a little. So, and all this is doing is we're creating the contour of that little hill. We're going to do the same thing over here. And this is just a visual. We're going to shade over all of this, so it's not a big deal. But just by adding those little contour lines, now you can kind of see the depth and the form of the road and the hills. You can see that it's kind of lower in the center, and it kind of goes up towards the sides. So, and then now, with that same pencil, our 2H, if we follow these lines down, it's going to be, everything's flat in the center of the road, right? But if you drew these shadows, it's going to come down, it's going to follow that contour line, and then go straight across. These are the shadows for the trees. This is where it starts to come together. And you guys are going to be like, wow, it took our second grade art class into a more advanced class. Let's see. Kind of goes down to that hill and then across. And every one of these trees is going to have a shadow. Even these ones. And as you see, they're curving with the contour of that hill. Hopefully that makes sense. And that's just, we're just getting started with it. So now you could go. And I'm just going to shade over all of this. And we'll go back and erase where we need to. I'm just going to use the side of that blending stump and just shade it all. Okay, now if you can see the shadows, you know that the light source is coming from this way. It's coming from this direction, right? Because the shadows are cast in this direction. So that means you're going to have a little bit of a lip right here on the road. So we're going to darken that up. And here's the cool part. Just darken that just a little bit. This line going up kind of puts some creates the look of that hill. And then maybe here you could start adding some more detail into those back trees. If they're too light and you can't see them enough, you can add some more trees back there. And they'll be smaller, obviously, the further they are off into the distance. There's a darker one here. We'll put a thicker one here. Right, and then maybe this one's probably a little bit too light, so we'll thicken that up a little bit. But you can see how they get lighter and lighter as they go off in the distance. And it's just a game of going back and forth, layering. Now, let's see. This is, again, with my HB. This is kind of our midtones. What I'm going to do here is I'm just dragging these short little contour, or these kind of long contour lines, not short. And it's going to create the, like we started out with originally. It's creating the form and kind of making the hill, those little foothills, stand out. We're going to go back and blend those out afterwards. But what's going to be left over is going to be very subtle, but you're still going to see those kind of direction lines or those contour lines. And we'll do the same thing on the other side over here. Start from the road or the edge of the road. It's hard for me to get this angle. And kind of whip it up. And when you vary, when you make your lines varied in value and in I make them kind of random so they're not all perfectly spaced. It creates these little peaks and valleys to your hill there. We've got all of our midtones down, so now you can start adding, or just kind of refining things and adding some of your extra details. So what I like to do is just make the edge here less perfect. And then have some of them kind of jump out like this. And then wrap around this corner. You can see how it starts to build that road up. It starts to build these little hills. And maybe we'll sharpen up. I forgot some of our shadows over here. And then we'll go back afterwards and we're going to add some highlights here and there. Let's add that little shadow across the road. And some of these, you're going to have a little tree back here. You don't see it. It's off the side of the screen. And then you can start blending all that together. Here's the fun part. If you have a fine tip eraser and you do have a gray wash over everything, and you have your contour lines, they're creating the shape of those little hills with this little magic eraser. If you erase just at the top of these little hills, look what happens. It has this little highlight. And you just kind of layer them in. And it creates more depth. You've got your height, you've got your midtones and your shadows. And these little highlights make your drawing start to stand out and make different elements of your drawing create depth without much effort because you put your midtones down. I know I erased right over that thing. So you go back and add some more to your trees here and there and some of the shadows. But it's a game of going back and forth with all of your layers. But you can see, hopefully, with these different pencils, kind of a little trick to letting them kind of do the work for you, and just creating a drawing with very simple shapes and very simple shading. You can add some more over here. And when you do these little highlights here, just make sure that they're with the contour, that they're going with the shape of that hill. And it all starts to kind of come together and have form and depth and value and look a little bit more realistic. Obviously, if you want to draw something photorealistic, you're going to need a reference photo. But just kind of from our imagination, that's a good start to a little road, little country road, maybe through the forest. We'll go through, and I think I may have bitten off a little bit more than I could chew to get all of the details into this thing. But if you just use these little lines, these little kind of contour lines, it makes a big difference. And it'll all start to come together. You can see that hillside starting to come together now with the highlights, our midtones, and our shadows really start to come together. And we'll put a couple more over here. You can make these lines, the edge of the trees, maybe in the front, make them a little sharper than the ones off in the distance. But it doesn't have to be super difficult. If you use just a few of these little tips and tricks and let the tools kind of do the work for you, it may not look like a photo, but it'll help create depth, perspective, and a lot of other depth, perspective. You're going to have value, and you're going to have all of these different elements kind of not by accident, but kind of without really trying too hard. And it'll make you create this really cool scene and make your drawings a little bit more realistic instead of just those flat roads. All right. Well, that's what I've got for perspective and learning these tools. Thanks for drawing along with me. Hopefully your drawing turned out really cool and you learned a little bit in the process. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.